evening. My name is Bob Liff, and this is the CUNY Forum, a monthly town meeting that brings prominent New Yorkers together with faculty and students of the Edward T. Rogowski Internship Program in Government and Public Affairs. For 35 years, the city has tried to wrestle with the challenge posed by homelessness, and for 35 years, the number of homeless has continued to grow. The reasons include a variety of social dysfunctions, from substance abuse, in particular the recent epidemic crisis of opioid abuse, to people combating unemployment or mental health issues, and to quote a great city philosopher, because the rent is too damn high. Mayor de Blasio came into office promising to tackle the rise in homelessness and even appointed the chief legal aid lawyer who represented the homeless as commissioner of the Department of Homeless Services, which has seen its budget top $1 billion for the first time. But the numbers have continued to rise. Now the mayor has proposed an ambitious plan to open 90 shelters, end the use of expensive and too often shoddy hotel rooms as temporary housing, and shutter 360 apartment buildings used as cluster sites where homeless families are sent. De Blasio's commitment to create or preserve hundreds of thousands of units of affordable housing obviously is the best long-term solution, but it is a mammoth and difficult undertaking. Economic forces from gentrification to deindustrialization have taken thousands of affordable units and entry-level jobs off the market as the city struggles to fill the gap. And the mayor acknowledges that his plan would cut the homeless population over the next 5 years by just 2,500 from its current daily census of around 60,000, and that doesn't include people who are living on the streets. With anticipated cuts in assistance from the federal government, both for rental assistance and direct services, the task is daunting. The mayor also announced a shift in how the city will decide where shelters go. He seeks to redefine the fair share formula, which was supposed to spread shelters around geographically, to one which places the homeless close to the neighborhoods where they come from or had their most recent address. Needless to say, the plan has already met strong objections even before it has taken its first steps. Residents of Crown Heights have blocked the use of an armory near Eastern Parkway as a shelter, and in an election year, neither the local council member nor mayor himself wants to anger too many voters. We're joined by 4 New Yorkers with varying roles in analyzing and confronting the homelessness crisis and efforts to combat it. Vanessa Gibson is a city council member representing Bronx 16th District. Thomas Main is a professor in Baruch College's Mark School of Public and International Affairs. Courtney Gross is a reporter from New York One who covers the homelessness issue and will tell us what it all means. And Raisa Rodriguez is vice president of policy and planning for WIN, or Women in Need. Tom, let me start with you. You've been writing about this for a long time and studying homelessness for 35 years.
Yes.
We've been trying to fix it, and it keeps getting worse.
Yes, that's frustrating. There's been no magic bullet, which is too bad. I think overall, New York City has done a pretty good job, somewhere between a B+ and an A-, of managing homelessness. It's very difficult to do what de Blasio wants to do, which is turn the tide on homelessness.
Vanessa, the Bronx and Brooklyn have the largest numbers of shelters. Yes. I mean, we supposedly had this geographic distribution based on fair share, but it hasn't really worked that way. How do you deal with, how do you balance the need with the concerns of your constituents?
It's certainly a great challenge. As a council member in my 4th year, I look at my community and we've faced an incredible amount of saturation. We have a high number of shelters for families, single adults, single men, single women, domestic violence victims. We are seeing an incredible amount of services for many of these families. I think for many New Yorkers and certainly elected officials, understanding the faces of those who are going to a shelter every night. They are predominantly families. They are single parents with children. They are single men and women. They are the faces of our city. And as the number continues to soar, we're at 60,000 families and a large
60,000 people.
60,000 people and about 27,000 children.
Kids,
those numbers are real. In my school district, I have a high concentration in District 9 of children in temporary housing. So it's a real tough balance because these are families that need help. These are families that may have had emergency situations where they've been evicted, they've fallen on hard times, and they simply need long-term housing. I think how you look at the siting and the equitable distribution of shelters across the city of New York is something that the previous administration has struggled with, and we still struggle to this day. We don't get our fair share. You have neighborhoods that have 0 shelters compared to many like mine where we have several shelters. And we in the Bronx have welcomed an abundance of social service and supportive housing, and we will continue to look at future projects and how they meet with the demand of this city. But I truly believe if you look at a fair share analysis, every neighborhood should take on shelters and look at additional opportunities to take on a citywide problem. Being homeless is not a Bronx issue, it's not a minority issue, but it is an issue that is facing the entire city of New York, and the entire city of New York needs to address it.
Raisa, WIN is, Women in Need is a long history of, I think it's something like 12,000 people that that you help out on a nightly basis.
On a yearly basis.
What are the myths about homelessness?
I think there are many. I think we serve in the city about 10% of the homeless. And we are constantly trying to figure out ways to really raise awareness around who the homeless are. Just like my co-panelists mentioned, this is a citywide issue. And what many of us fail to realize is that who the homeless are often families. 90% of them are headed by a single mom. And it's very much also a children's issue. I often like to cite that 60% of our clients at WIN are actually children under the age of 18. And oftentimes when we talk about homelessness, those are the forgotten faces of homelessness. The fact that homeless are actually families headed by women with young children.
Courtney, it's an election year. You and I have spent a lot of time covering elections, dealing with elections. Is this a tough year to try to push through a redefinition of, redefining fair share means that neighborhoods like Vanessa's, where more homeless people come from than from the Upper East Side, will be getting more placements. I mean, how is this playing out politically?
It's quite unbelievable that the mayor is up for re-election this year. And in the end,
as is every council member.
As is every council person. And the end of February, Mayor de Blasio comes out and decides to unleash a plan to construct or build 90 new homeless shelters throughout the city. Obviously, that plan is going to be covering 5 years, well into a potential second term from the mayor. But any political observer would say this is not necessarily the best or the most opportune time to unveil that type of plan. Perhaps this shows how confident the mayor is in his particular re-election. We obviously know that he does not see, as of this point, any real formidable opponents. So him coming out with this plan saying he wants to restructure the entire shelter system is a sign of that confidence. As for council members, you're going to see them most likely fight back. And I think we're starting to see that. Obviously, the mayor has his definition of fair share. In his plan, his definition of fair share is every single neighborhood needs to take care of the homeless individuals or families that are coming from that neighborhood. For instance, that means in Greenwich Village, you're going to have about a couple dozen people. That means that you need to have a shelter in Greenwich Village for a couple dozen people. In the councilwoman's district, that means you need capacity for potentially thousands of people. The mayor's idea of fair share is you will have more shelters in more impoverished areas and areas of color in this city. Meanwhile, more affluent areas will not have shelters. The council is proposing legislation to make it more equitable, to make sure that facilities
kind of the old fair share
throughout the city. So potentially in an election year, you may see this clash between the mayor and the council.
As a historical phenomenon, this debate.
Well, talking about the issue of placing 90 new shelters, David Dinkins, who was de Blasio's mentor, tried to do something like that during his single term. There was a plan to...
And he came in right after the new city charter was adopted, which includes the fair share.
Right. And Dinkins's plan was, we're going to build more shelters, right? And they're going to be run by not-for-profit organizations. And how are we going to convince the neighborhoods and communities to accept them? Answer, the fair share formula is going to be so fair. It's going to be worked out by computers, which was unusual back then. There's going to be constant communication and consultation with the communities. And everybody at the end of the day will say, gee, the process was so transparent and so just, we just can't object to it. Right? Didn't happen. Walked right into a buzzsaw. I interviewed people who were involved in those community negotiations. Nancy Waxstein, for example, who was Dinkins's coordinator on homeless policy, and she told me, I'd come out of these meetings at Staten Island and other neighborhoods. You could see the marks on my back from the beating I had taken. So I've seen de Blasio's plan, turning the tide on homelessness. It seems to me, again, he's counting on lots of consultation, lots of transparency and so forth. So that didn't work before. And then also, he doesn't even have going for him the argument that, it's going to be spread out all over the city. So, don't bet the rent. That's what I say.
Right. So, what do you think of this? You have shelters in various, homeless
We have
residential
10
settings.
10 family shelters across the city. The problem is very complex, right? We know that, for instance, what folks often don't realize is that 51% of folks coming into shelter are actually employed. So 51% of our moms coming into shelter are working, sometimes 1, 2 jobs, sometimes even 3 jobs, and are unable to make ends meet. The number one driver of folks coming into shelter is eviction, but there are also a number of other reasons. DV's on the rise. There's a huge amount of contributing factors that really drive this issue. I think first there's a huge affordability issue that it's like the elephant in the room, right? We know that real wages have been declining while rents are climbing up, and that is having a real strain on folks' ability to make ends meet.
Vanessa, one of your colleagues, Jumaane Williams, had a piece today in City and State talking about that rent. The rent is too damn high, that is the major contributor, and that in the mayor's mandatory inclusionary housing, in which you have to have affordable housing in developments, but yet the levels at which those rents are set are too high for many of the people that we're talking about trying to serve.
I think that's because affordability doesn't apply to everyone. It's a loosely used word that simply is not reachable for many New Yorkers. And when you look at MIH and ZQA and the contentious debate that was not easy to get past to the
MIH
council.
is
mandatory inclusionary housing and zoning equality and
zoning
affordability.
equality, right.
And when you look at the mandatory plan, and we needed that because New York City had no mandatory inclusionary plan at all to mandate some level of affordability for new development. And even with that citywide plan, you have 14 neighborhoods that are now looking at neighborhood rezonings. I have one called Jerome in the Bronx, looking at 2 square miles of rezoning, residential and commercial, and more development for an expected growth in the city of New York and obviously in the Bronx. But I think many families are living at or below the federal poverty line. We're talking about a family of 4 making less than $40,000 a year. So if you look at some of the AMIs where they're at 50%,
AMI is
60,
area median income, which is the basis upon
Right.
which rents are set in affordable
right,
housing.
and if you look at a lot of the AMIs, they're just not reachable, and that's why you see so many families that are living in shelters every night and are working and are simply trying to find long-term housing. I think one of the most greatest challenges we have, and I learned myself talking to Commissioner Steve Banks, we're not moving families out of shelters quick enough. That's the reason why there's a need to build more. On average, and she can tell you from Wynn's perspective, families are living in shelters between 6 and 8 months or even longer. Some of these subsidy programs, like the Link vouchers, have eligibility requirements, and as soon as you are ineligible, you lose your voucher. So you have families that are full-time workers that have to minimize their hours to be part-time just so they can maintain that eligibility status. And that's not the message we want to send. So I've asked the commissioner to look at these Link 1, Link 2 vouchers and city FEPs and all the other subsidy programs, which are illegal to deny a family by virtue of their source of income. And we're going after landlords that are not taking these subsidy programs. I hear from families all the time, Ms. Gibson, I'm in a shelter, I have a voucher, and I cannot find an apartment. How can you help? These are the questions that we have to be able to answer. So I also think it's an affordability issue, but it's about access. How much affordable housing are we really building, and who are we building it for in the city?
And at what level of affordability?
Absolutely.
You talked about that. This is my words, not your words, that they may be politically nuts for confronting this issue during an election year. It's also, he's kind of brave for doing it. I mean, there's a level of commitment of, Bill de Blasio, progressive, who believes that this is something that the city has to do, that the city ought to do, even in the face of, federal government doing nothing for us?
Sure, because number one, the city is obligated by law to do it. The Callahan decision requires that every single person who is in need of shelter gets shelter. They don't really have a choice. So, and anyone that looks at the mayor's plan can say it's certainly brave for the mayor to go ahead and say that he's going to construct 90 new homeless shelters in the city over the next 5 years. But other people, critics, progressives in this city will tell you, well, he only wants to actually reduce the homeless population, or is aiming to reduce the homeless population by 2,500 people.
Out of 60,000.
What does that mean? That means that the city is essentially going to be treading water, that this is an unmanageable problem as of this point, and there is no clear solution. Part of that has to do with what the councilwoman was saying about the link voucher. Not only are landlords not accepting it, but then it gets back to the affordability question of, well, my link voucher for a family of, let's say, 3 covers about $1,200. Where am I going to find a 2-bedroom apartment in the city for $1,200? No family can find that.
So, how do you deal with this?
Well, we deal with this day in and day out with committed staff that really look at this issue from a human perspective. I think the one thing we also need to mention is that this has a real impact, right? This crisis has a real impact on families and on kids. The council member was just speaking about the length of stay that many families are having in shelter. Children are growing up 12, 14 months in shelter. That's not a short amount of time for a child under 5, right? Which about 40% of the kids that we serve are under age 5. And so we deal with it by really having a robust set of services that address the needs of families. You can imagine.
Are you confident that you're going to be able to retain those services? The budget priorities in Washington being what they are. How much do you depend on federal funds?
That's a whole nother story, which we're also watching very closely. We're fortunate to be able to work with private funders and have private-public partnerships, but I think it takes a lot of collaborative work. We work closely with City Council as well to really provide a wide range of services that we know families need.
When you say wide, is it substance services? What are the range of services?
The key is that it's individualized, right? So every family is unique. Every family coming into shelter has a unique set of needs. And so it's about assessing what those needs are and really tailoring services to those needs, right? So for some families, it's literally shelter, right? It's roof off of their head. For other families, there are real significant issues with trauma and violence, right? Experience with violence. So counseling is important. For other families, income building services. As I mentioned, many moms are already working, so we don't like to think of it as job training, but rather how do we connect moms with more education so they could have higher paying jobs, better benefits, and also at the end of the day, providing the range of services that children need to build resiliency.
Those are homeless families. And you're talking about people in shelters. We also have people who are in hotels. We have people who are in the cluster housing, who are put in apartments. There are varying times proposals to move homeless people up to the top of the list for vacant New York City Housing Authority apartments, where you have people who have been waiting 2 years in order to get an apartment. Anyway, you can jump in on this. I mean, how do you? Are we just squeezing a bottle and something comes out here or something comes out there?
Something I think that.
Or are we, or are we just treading water?
I mean, the clusters, initially the city was going to be getting out of clusters a lot sooner than what the mayor committed back in February. Initially, they were supposed to be out of them by next year. And then they realized that, well, the rate of homelessness is going to continue to be going up at the rate that it is now, which is quickly. So that means that I'm not going to be able to get all the families out of hotels and out of clusters before I can build enough capacity to put them in actual shelters like the one Women in Need operate, where they'll be able to get social services and job training and hopefully end up getting out of housing. So now we're going to have clusters around for a number of years. I don't believe we're going to be getting out of hotels until 2023. Much of the mayor's policy up until February has really been reactionary. They continue to be in clusters after the Giuliani administration started using it because essentially they were there. They said they were no longer going to be in hotels, and then they continued to put families or singles in hotels because the capacity continued to grow and grow and grow. There's a vacancy rate in the Department of Homeless Services right now at about, I think, 3 or less than 1%. What does that mean? That means that there's about 30 to 40 vacant places to put people every single night. So until you grow the capacity and actually get people in stable shelter, that's when you can give them the services they need to hopefully end up getting out of shelter into permanent housing. But until the capacity increases, I don't think the city is going to be able to really minimize the population.
Well, that is not acceptable. We have been dealing with cluster housing for many years. And when you look at the majority, between 3,000 and 3,300 cluster units in this city, a majority of them are in the Bronx and Brooklyn. We have some in Queens and some in Manhattan. It is not acceptable. I have been absolutely aggressive with this administration on phasing cluster sites out. We're talking about families that are living in traditional, affordable units in a building, and we're talking about units of cluster housing. So the problem is these families get absolutely no services in terms of mental health, job training, education. They get nothing. It is unacceptable. We have been meeting with Commissioner Banks, and they have given us a 3-year plan on how they're going to phase them out, but we're looking at that unit. Can that unit turn back into an affordable unit? If it's in a building that doesn't have excessive violations, can we deal with those? And can we transition these families into long-term housing? We should not move cluster families into another shelter. It's unacceptable. Some of the new developments that I've seen in my district have been mixed use. So I have a new unit of 80 units that we have set aside for veterans because we don't do enough for them. We have affordable units of housing, and we also have some shelter families. And I had to fight with them to get more affordable units and less shelter families because I said this has to be a unit that is looked at as affordable housing and not another shelter. So I have been, just so emotional about this because it's not acceptable.
Because there is, there's a perception that there's a perception that you're dealing with homeless families, that there were a variety of pathologies involved, that they're unwelcome neighbors.
But
and that kind of is the NIMBY issue.
But that's been the case. I mean, I was at a new shelter that is opening in Crown Heights today. It was the shelter the mayor talked about in the end of February, a family shelter for 132 families. It's on Rogers Avenue in Crown Heights. I got a tour of that. It's being, the provider there is Samaritan Village, a reputable nonprofit. And you walk into one of the units, it has new appliances, it has a stove, it has a fridge, it has bedrooms. One bedroom was about 500 square feet. So obviously it's a tiny place for a 3-person family, but it gives you services and a roof over your head. Earlier that day, I had visited a cluster site, and that site did not provide the services and are typically known to have poor conditions. So the city is going to shut down the clusters and build this new shelter in Crown Heights. What happens when you're standing outside of that shelter in Crown Heights? Every single resident that I passed while I was just shooting video of the building today says, homeless people cannot come to my neighborhood. They cannot come to my neighborhood. And I explained to them this was families, this is women and children. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They think that the property value will go down, crime will go up. And to be honest, none of those have really proven to be true. The fact is whether it's NIMBY or some other reason, people do not want more homeless shelters in their neighborhood. For instance, Councilwoman, would you allow another shelter in your neighborhood?
I would fight back because, again, I want long-term housing. I like the idea of having mixed-use buildings, just like the one I described.
When you say mixed use, you mean mixed income or mixed use?
Mixed use of the building. So veterans, youth aging out of foster care, some homeless families, because there are social services on site and it's not a cluster, and then we have permanent housing. You can get away with projects like that in districts like mine because technically it's not a full-fledged shelter. the idea and the concept, and and I hate to hear those conversations about those people.
That's
those
right.
people are New Yorkers, and they're
They're
our
us.
children,
They're
and they're
us.
our families. Like, how dare you make those types of remarks? We're talking about people that fall on hard times that only need a level of support. And contrary to what people may think, many New Yorkers are one paycheck away from an eviction. If their income changes, they could easily be evicted and easily fall into a shelter. So I want everyone to have sympathy and sensitivity around these conversations. We're talking about human beings that need support and need help and need long-term housing, just like everyone else in this city.
Tom, we're also, we're talking about 40-something thousand people and families. There's also
Yes.
13-some thousand people who are individuals.
Yes.
Who, mostly men, but not all men.
Yes.
And those are different. Those present different challenges.
One thing that could be said is when we talk about the homeless, okay, that's a misnomer, right? It's really many different populations, and to lump them all into one category.
And the city is trying to deal with
Yes.
different categories of people in different ways.
And good, and I think
Right.
that's an advance that I've seen over the years, right? We're more picking our targets. I think the city. I don't think that there has been an explosion of homeless people on the street. Okay, Mayor de Blasio got hit with that very hard by the tabloids at one point early in his administration. I don't see any evidence that the number of people on the street actually went up. And as a matter of fact, I think one of the successes of city homeless policy has been the development of an effective outreach strategy. It used to be the idea was, oh, if you're on the street and you're disabled, mentally ill or substance abusing or whatever, what we do is we go to you and say, gosh, if you'll clean up your act, we'll give you permanent housing. And that was supposed to incentivize you to get your act together. And in fact, a lot of people said no. Right? So there was a revolution in the approach. We now have a housing first approach where we say, okay, we're going to move you into housing right
We're
away.
going to move you off the street.
Right, move you out. Right, but see, this was it. But that was exactly it. It doesn't work if you say, we will move you to a shelter right away. You have to say, we will move you to something like permanent housing. Then that turns out to be very tricky, because what happens if somebody that you've been approaching for months about this and who has been saying, no, I don't want to do it. What happens if one day he says, or she says, yes, take me? Well, now you're on the spot. And so the bureaucracy had to learn, to enable the outreach workers to make a commitment without contacting the front office that, yeah, we will move you into something like permanent housing. And there had to be a first step. They were called stabilization units, I believe, where you got your ID together and so forth. And so that worked out quite effectively. And I remember when I first was covering this beat back in the early 60s, the estimate of the number of homeless people on the streets, famous estimate, was 36,000 people on the street. Now, that was an exaggeration, right? But still, you had more back then, in the early 80s than you do now. And the people out there are being watched and observed and all the rest of it. And so I think the city has done a reasonably good job with the homeless people on the street. I think de Blasio administration seems to have been kind of politically inept or incautious. I think they came in and the expectations were very high because de Blasio was a progressive. He had made inequality the centerpiece of his campaign. I think a lot of people expected there was going to be a night and day change, and certainly the tabloids wanted to claim that he had claimed there would be a night and day change. And when that didn't happen, I think, de Blasio ended up behind the 8 ball. And I also think that the big policy initiative, it seems to me, in the de Blasio administration, the homeless, was reintroducing rent subsidies for homeless families, which had come to an end under Bloomberg. And a lot of people, me including me, said, oh, good, the subsidies will move people out of the shelters faster, right? And that'll drive the census down, and then de Blasio will be able to declare victory. Didn't happen, right? So why that didn't happen is, I think maybe part of the reason for that is that while the subsidies were reintroduced, so you had the potential for moving more people out, I think for a period of time there was a relaxation in the eligibility criteria for getting into the shelter. That was probably not a good move, right? They probably the subsidies only work if all things remain equal, right? So I think de Blasio, because of some poor maneuvers, ended up looking maybe worse than in fact he is.
How do you deal with? Do you have individual shelters in your district?
Standalone?
No, shelters for individuals, for
Single? Oh,
yes.
absolutely.
I mean, do
I
those
have a 200
pose
bed
different?
for single women with psychiatric needs in my district.
Do those pose different challenges?
Yes, they do.
Do they have a heightened sense of community opposition?
They do. If you talk about single men, usually the community erupts. They don't like the idea of having single men, and all sorts of connotations and stereotypes about men coming home from prison, sexual predators, etc. Public safety issue of women and mothers in the community. I think single adult women are much easier, and I have a shelter now that was 200 beds for single men, and we were able to close it, but instead we had 200 women that are now there, and their challenges are obviously equally as great but different. These are women with severe mental illness and psychiatric needs, but it's easier to get through a community like mine because the assumption is that women are less violent and they're less of a threat. That's the bottom line. I do look at the work we've done and trying to, keep families in their homes. A lot of this work in the homelessness conversation is about preservation. It's about keeping programs like J51 and tax abatements where rents are stabilized and they don't go up as much as a market value apartment. That's critical to this conversation because we have to work with landlords and make sure the old Mitchell-Lama program, rent stabilization, we have to make sure those units are protected. And that's why we fight so hard when Rent Guidelines Board votes every June on raises of 1 and 2 year leases. I think right to counsel, and that's something this council has been very firm on, in making sure that when tenants, if they do have to go to court for an eviction proceeding, they have a lawyer. Many of them go to court and sign off on documents that they simply cannot comply with, and you understand. And so that's a huge part of this: preservation and keeping them in their homes, preventing evictions. And we've seen with the $62 million we've invested in civil legal services, citywide evictions have decreased by 24%. So that is progress, but we have a long way to go. I think these are all pieces that have to simply work together.
It's tough to kind of categorize what the largest causes are. If you had to, compare between what I called social dysfunction and kind of a straight rent is too damn high, what's the prime driver?
I would say it's a combination. I mean, the largest proportion of causes or reasons entering
do you
shelter.
Do all family shelters, or do you have individuals?
Well, we have 10 family shelters across the city. We also have one shelter that's for single women with a mental health diagnosis. But most of our shelters are family shelters.
But is it, setting that aside, where you have women with the mental challenges?
Sure.
Is it
the main driver has been eviction by and large? Like I mentioned, many families are unable to make ends meet, even if they are working. So eviction is a driving force, but we're also looking at other things. DVs of has been going up as well.
Domestic violence.
Correct, domestic violence. And then we also know that there are also social emotional issues. There are mental health issues as well that really interfere with families' ability to maintain stable housing. So I would say it's a combination of all those factors.
When you look at this, I mean, you've covered individual shelters are much more controversial than family shelters are, even though family shelters are controversial.
Absolutely. The entire the lawsuit that's going on in Crown Heights right now, the idea that the community is suing the administration to prevent a shelter from opening, that is a single men shelter. That may be a single men shelter for men over the age of 62 who have a job. That does not matter to the community.
Is that what it is? It
is. It does not matter. Because when you think of a single men's shelter, you think of Bellevue, you think of the Bedford Armory, you think of Fort Bell Men's Shelter in East New York. Those places, if you stand outside of those places, you're going to see things that you don't see on a regular basis. And a lot of men in homeless shelters are afflicted with drug addiction or mental health issues. And many times, these men could have entered shelter and have had something that has not been diagnosed yet, or they haven't seen a mental health care professional in an incredibly long time, or haven't had substance abuse counseling. And they're coming, and they're obviously in need. They're not only in need of shelter, but they're in need of services. So it is a stark and sad thing to see when you stand outside of these shelters, which I often do reporting.
Tom, we were talking before the show about how that in the early 90s there was kind of a leveling or a slight decline.
Yes.
But that also was a time after Koch launched his huge expand the,
Right.
build 165,000
Right.
units. But what Koch had that nobody has today is he had all that vacant land, all that in rem land. It cost nothing to get the land.
Yeah.
It cost the city nothing to get the land upon which to erect this housing.
Right.
That's not the case anymore.
Yeah, well, I think that was partly the reason why from about 1990 to about 2000 you had a.
It was also partly the Giuliani administration,
It's
which
exactly
was
what I was
as
going to say.
cruel- as cruel, for want of a
you had
better
a
word.
flat, you had a pretty flat shelter census. Yeah, I think part of the answer to that was that the Koch administration put a lot of resources into building more affordable units, most of which did not go to the homeless. So that was not like a magic bullet. I think Giuliani administration. Hey, would I want Giuliani to come over for my 4th of July barbecue? Probably not. But he was.
He can actually be quite charming.
Maybe. But he was, he's an effective administrator. He implemented a sort of a new approach to homelessness, which was what I call a paternalistic approach, where you said, yes, you've got a right to shelter. That's what happened under Koch and Dinkins. But also, you've got to participate in various sorts of programs which are supposed to, A, rehabilitate you, and B, discourage you from moving in. And there was a fair amount of discouragement of the eligibility process, especially for the families, was very, very tight. And, unfortunately, I think that if you're going to keep the shelter census manageable, you have to have a very strict eligibility process. You have to allow in only the very worst cases. That means maybe turning away some people who, perhaps deserve some kind of support, but may be impractical to take on that many people. And I think that the story of the de Blasio administration and how they handled eligibility is complex, but I think at least for a while they decided to back away from some of the meanness as it was perceived of the Bloomberg administration. And, they ended up with more people than they would have had if they had held the gates.
There's also been, I'm sorry.
50% of families now are considered ineligible.
That's right.
There's still a large percentage of families that are sent, away, essentially.
Yeah.
And the administration does a lot to try to find them places somewhere else to go. They contact their families, obviously. And, even if you are found ineligible, I've met a lot of families that are going to PATH that are found ineligible, but it doesn't matter to them. They're going to continue going
come
back
back,
every
correct.
There's a couple of
10
things to say.
days.
One is, you're absolutely right, only about 50% are found eligible. Didn't mean to imply that like 99% are found eligible, but it may be that 50% eligibility rate is not workable, is what I'm suggesting. And it's also true that families reapply and reapply. Yep. My understanding is that for a while under Bloomberg, immediate reapplications were not allowed. Right? And then I believe that immediate reapplication was allowed for a while. So look, I'm just saying this. There was a period of time when people talked, I think sometimes incautiously, and Ms. Bloomberg engaged in this kind of rhetoric, which is we're going to solve the problem because we've got one or two really good ideas and we're going to solve the problem. And of course it didn't solve the problem, and Bloomberg ended up with a lot of egg on his face. And I think so that reduces you to managing the system, and if you're going to manage the system, you got to turn every knob that you've got, and that includes eligibility.
I find that people often ask me, and you may be better equipped to ask this theoretical question. People ask me often how many people are, quote, gaming the system? How many people are going into shelter and trying to just get a free apartment? And I find that when I'm talking to families, no one would want to go through this
That's the most
process.
demoralizing view, right? I mean, no family would choose
There were some
to be in
other
shelter.
I'm sorry. There were some other things that are going on. You know, for instance, especially in immigrant communities with a lot of undocumented people, you have all these illegal basement apartments and stuff. And there's talk about legalizing
Quarter
those
house.
apartments.
I had a student a while ago who did her master's thesis on Chinese immigrants living in illegally converted apartments, right? And she found that there were quite a number of them, right? And I think she found that there was something like, tens of thousands of converted units that had people in them. So I think that's, one of the big mysteries of homelessness is the city, in terms, if you're talking about housing space, right? We've got 3 million housing units? That's a lot of space. And we've got 60,000 individuals who are homeless. Well, in one way, that's a lot. On the other hand, the physical space is there. So what you want to do is try to develop some kind of mechanism whereby it's possible and even, profitable for those 60,000 people to be moved, at least some of them anyhow, into all of this space that's sitting around unused. Now, that turns out to be very tricky. One obvious thing is you got to be very careful about safety. That's number one. Number two, as my student found about the Chinese immigrants, well, they come over, right, and then they are immediately accepted into the community of Chinese.
These are undocumented immigrants.
Yeah,
essentially.
they're immediately accepted into the community of Chinese restaurants, and then the people who own the restaurants know Chinese people who have these units, so you immediately get linked into a system. And unfortunately, with many, there isn't any system like that for linking up families with single mothers with a similar community. It's tough, but I do think you're right. I think we have to figure out some way to make better use of that space that's going unused.
But
I
also
do think another challenge, just to make sure that this is emphasized, recognize that the only intake for all families that are coming through the shelter system is the PATH Center in the Bronx. I think it is highly unfair and unreasonable to ask families to trek to the Bronx in order to be going through the eligibility process.
For
I've had
individuals, it's in
cases-
Brooklyn, I think, right?
Right,
Also one
and
place.
the administration had talked some time ago, and we have to revisit that conversation about adding capacity in other boroughs so that if you're in the Bronx, you go to Bronx. If you're in Brooklyn, you go there. I think it's unfair for families to have to go all the way to the Bronx.
Ma'am, let's take a question from one of the students in the audience. Give us your name and your campus, please.
Hello, my name is Haley and I attend Lehman College.
All right.
Yes. And my question is, do you think that the current Trump administration could possibly perpetuate the homelessness issue here?
Absolutely. I think they perpetuate a lot of things. I think since the election, we've had so many conversations around immigration, around domestic violence, women's rights. I think everything is on the table. His proposed budget just demonstrates that he wants to turn away and reverse everything that we stand for. I think many potential victims of domestic violence or even victims of crime that normally would come forward are now less likely to come forward. ICE agents coming into our city and our schools and our courts is real. And I am scared about the impact of what this means. We've stood with the mayor and the chancellor to prohibit them from coming in public schools. Next, we're going to have to deal with courts. But also, even while we protect city property, what happens if a child leaves school and goes home and realizes mom or dad was deported? I mean, that's real for a lot of our families. And what I'm careful to make sure that we do is we focus on immigration attorneys and other, civil legal service providers that are sharing accurate information, because we have to resist this administration. We have to make sure that people that are in our city understand that we are going to fight like hell, that we are a sanctuary city. Even now they're talking about cutting our funding as a sanctuary city. That's absolutely absurd. I think, we are going to stand firm. We're going to do what is necessary. We have the legal system, the court system that will fight with us. I do think we have to be obviously much more creative and draw out those, residents and those potential victims, because many of them are living in the shadows of darkness right now.
I also think, obviously, Section 8 is incredibly vulnerable in the president's budget, as well as
Section 8 are rental vouchers that people get, right?
and I was going to say NYCHA, but not only NYCHA just seeing cuts across the board, but also affordable housing tax credits that HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development give out. My understanding of that is that they are also on the chopping block, which means if they are not essentially disseminated to affordable housing developers, then there will be no affordable housing construction.
To my mind is the most interesting. One of the interesting things about Trump and the homeless is HUD is the federal aid point agency on this issue. It's being run now by Ben Carson. Yeah. Okay, I teach public administration, so here's a question: is it possible to take somebody who has absolutely one day of public service and put him in charge of a federal agency and make it work? That's the big question I want to see answered. The answer is my hypothesis.
Secretary
is
of
no.
State,
Yeah.
Secretary of
exactly.
Education, Secretary of
Yeah,
Housing
right,
and Urban
right,
Development.
yeah, that's my point
Where do
exactly.
Your advisor.
Where do you want to? Where do you want to stop? Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Kieran Island. I go to John Jay College of Criminal Justice. My question is, do you believe that the homeless shelter programs are they are more aggressive towards men, unwelcoming towards men, and is that one of the reasons why there are more families in homeless shelters than men?
I actually do. I think the eligibility requirements are less stringent for singles and men and women, single men and women, to enter the shelter system. The eligibility requirements are even more stringent for families.
Right.
There's really effectively no eligibility requirements for singles. You present yourself and you're in.
Right.
With families, you got to jump through a lot of hoops.
I mean, I would say that
Go ahead.
like 70% of those who are homeless are families. And so I think that's in response to the need, right?
But the difference also between families and singles, and I think what is preventative for singles to enter shelter is there is more crime and violence and drugs in single shelters. That's just a fact. You're going to have a family shelter, and the crime that you'll see in a family shelter is domestic violence.
Right.
When you go to a single men's shelter, you will see drug overdoses and violence and things like that.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Frank Perez. I attend Queens College. And my question is, do you believe that the city is doing enough of a job to serve the homeless? And given preliminary discussions for budgeting for the fiscal year, is there anything else they can do?
I mean, when you look at the budget, the homeless services budget, it's over $1 billion.
Yeah.
Last year was the first time. I mean, you could argue that whatever's going on, it's not for a lack of money.
That's right. We have invested so much money into homeless services, into employment programs, diversion programs, assistance programs, subsidy programs. I mean, I can name so many. I am very involved in this. I'm on the General Welfare Committee that oversees HRA and DSS and ACS. So I work a lot with Chair Steve Levin. And, I always think of what we could do to be better. We can never stop trying, and we can never be complacent, because as long as those numbers that you hear, the 60,000, the 27,000, those numbers are real, and those are people
Those
and
are
children.
individuals.
Those are real numbers, and I feel like, again, we have to move families out quicker. We have to develop real affordable housing that meets families at the lowest of the spectrum at 30% AMI and 40. And we also have to have an ambitious and a real aggressive preservation program. We have to look at the eligibility requirements. Are they tangible? Are they reachable for families? Like, I don't like to put unexpected, demands on families when they cannot comply with those eligibility requirements. So the idea, and I can talk about some of the subsidy programs where in order to be eligible, you have to have a public assistance case. And many of the working clients that are working are not eligible for public assistance because they're working, and we want them to work. We don't want them to be on the system. So I think some of those things we have to look at in order to really drive these numbers down and to have a city council that can embrace this. We don't want to support 90 new shelters over 5 years. What we want to support is an ambitious plan that creates and preserves real affordable housing.
Are undocumented people eligible for shelter service? I don't even know.
Yes, we have a small percentage of families who are undocumented.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Mohammed Dahatu. I am a student here at the CUNY Graduate Center, and my question is about the homelessness in the subway system. As we are starting to see an increase of homeless individuals in the subway system, is the city doing anything to address that issue? So,
I'm sorry. I
It's-
couldn't.
Was about the subway, the homeless in the subway
Homeless on
system.
the subway.
It's also, we're also coming out of winter, and there's a lot of homeless individuals who are going to ride end of service lines, so lines that stay completely underground the entire time because it keeps them warm. So you're going to see a lot more individuals on the subway in winter, and that's probably why the problem seems so
But you know
pronounced
what is very
now.
interesting? And Vanessa, maybe you can tell me if I'm right about this. I seem to recall that before the de Blasio administration, outreach to homeless people in the subways was run by the MTA, and didn't the city take that back
Yes.
over?
So glad you asked that question.
Right. So my question is, I'm an academic, and I'm going to. You're on the city council. I'm going to pump you for all the information I can get out of you. How has that been working? So that's a big public
Yep. I
administration
actually know a
change.
lot
Instead
about
of the MTA, you have the Department of Homeless Services doing. So did that make an impact or not?
I believe it did. We shifted a $6 million contract from the MTA to Bowery Services,
Right.
BSR. They are the contracted provider to deal with homelessness on the subway. I agree with what Courtney has said. And, remember, many of these single homeless adults were living in someone's apartment, probably on someone's couch. And now as the weather gets nice, you're going to see them in the parks, in playgrounds, all across our neighborhoods. I think when you talk to many of the street homeless individuals, you will find that many of them have no shelter history. Many of them are coming from somewhere. And the idea is a lot of them don't want to go to shelter because of the conditions.
And
They
they're
believe
afraid,
they're
right.
more safe on the street than in a shelter. Like, to me, I don't like to hear that, and it makes me even more re-energized to focus on greater work, because you should feel safe in a shelter in this city. You shouldn't feel that you have to live on a street just to feel safe. So I think BSR has been doing good work, but I will tell you that, again, because the nice weather is coming, we will start to see more people. Even coming here, I saw a vacant property on 34th Street between 5th and 6th, and there was a whole catchment, at least of 3 people that were sleeping. Right now, I saw them. And so this is happening all over the city, and I feel like because when you look at street homelessness, it's happening all across the city. In my district, in other members' districts, affluent, minority communities, it's something that everyone sees, and this administration is reacting
But one
to.
thing that's and for all the time that I've spent studying the homeless and there's people on the street, you always hear many of them say, "Oh, I don't want to go into the shelter because it's unsafe." Now, I understand, and Courtney could tell you that the single shelters, in fact, the people do get killed and it's violent and all the rest of it. Whether it's really more unsafe to be in a shelter than to be living in the subway, of course, we don't know what the rate of violence and murder against homeless people in the subways is. I'm very skeptical that if you actually develop that number somehow, that it would really turn out that you're making the smart move by staying in the subway. But I think there are a lot of factors involved with it. But you want to be cautious before you kind of sign off on the thesis that the streets are safer than the shelters.
The other thing about the street population is they are going to be, for lack of a better word, the sickest people,
Yeah,
the sickest
sure,
homeless people. They are going to be the most afflicted with either drug abuse or mental illness. And part of that affliction that they have is that they do not want to go inside. They feel comfortable in their surroundings that they may have been living in for a decade out on the street. I have a woman that lives around the corner from me, and she's been offered housing a lot, but she has been living on the sidewalk for 20-something years, and she doesn't want to go anywhere else.
No.
Yes.
My name is Jermaine Muso, and I attend Queens College. I hear a lot of talk of like people who work in shelters or work for the homeless not getting decent wages, and you just spoke about the $1 billion for combating homelessness. Is part of that money going to incentivize professionals to work for homeless?
That's a very good question, because a significant percentage of homeless services are provided by city workers, and a significant percentage, a larger percentage, I believe, are provided by non-governmental organizations, by not-for-profits. And there is a move, the Drive for 15 move, to raise wages, which will impact the ability to provide services, but will help those people from becoming homeless. I mean, it's a broader...
Absolutely. It's an issue that we've also been dealing with. One of my colleagues, Councilmember Helen Rosenthal, talks a lot about the human services contracts that the city has with many of our not-for-profit providers. And, you know, many of these workers are not a part of a union. They're not municipal workers, so they don't have the union protection in terms of wages and other fringe benefits. And, you know, just sustainability in terms of job security. So we're trying to work with this administration and look to support in the budget so that we can bring them up to something that's sustainable, like the Fight for 15, and making sure that not only are we recognizing their skill, but we're giving them the salary that they rightfully deserve.
And that will keep them in the job.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. We're running short of time.
Yes, hello. My name is Austin Johnson. I'm from John Jay College. My question is, I worked in the Department of Social Services in Nassau County. And
in where? I'm sorry?
In Nassau County.
Nassau County.
And while working there, a person could be homeless, and within that day, go to the DSS, get screened, get housing, get enrolled in the job program, get mental health screening.
We're running short of time. Please.
What is preventing New York City from creating this seamless web of resources?
Well, it's been 35 years of effort. We have half a minute left. Anybody want to create this seamless web in 30 seconds?
I think it's demand. I think it's volume. I think it's availability of affordable housing. I think it's wages, the wage gap that we're, constantly dealing with. I think it's, access and opportunity for many families and single adults. We recognize that years ago, it was just about housing families. Like all they needed was an apartment and they would be fine. Now, it's not just housing, it's social services, education, it's vocation, it's a multitude of services that have to be coupled with housing.
Let me cut us off there. I was a reporter for a long time. I always make deadline. Thank you all. We'll see you next time on CUNY Forum. Thank you all.